Hello, everyone. So we're now at a panel discussion, and I think I've overheard a few questions about how these people were here, if they were part of the National Taiwan University students, so on and so forth. So actually, just a very brief background because we got a very short time. In a nutshell, though, they are actually part of DDMBA's Inner Dimensions of Climate Change Global Conference. So we've done it regionally and then a global conference. So these were young people then. Okay, that is probably 8-10 years ago, right? They were young people then, activists in their own ways doing things. And they came to our conference and learned about bringing out this inner dimensions of climate change, because we talk about climate change, we think about external things. But what about the climate change that is happening inside of us? We're going through global warming. Right? There's a lot of natural disasters that are happening and erupting up inside of us, and wars that is happening within us. So the title of this is actually, we say the tipping point is closer than you think. Don't expect this to be like we're saying tipping point as in the planetary tipping point. We're saying something else different. What I would like to draw on each of them is that the transformation, the tipping point of when this project that they're working on is transformed into their vision. So it moves from head to your heart. And how that happened and how it changed the way they do work. They're still doing the same thing, but they're doing it very differently. So I'd like to kind of draw on that for them to be able to kind of just share with you their personal experiences. So to let you know that your tipping point is closer than what you think, because it's your choice to move from up here to down here and to unify the both. All right, so we'll start with Alex. Okay, Alex is the baby of the Inner Dimensions of Climate Change delegation here. And he said, why does he have to start first? I said, because you sat there. Okay? So Alex is actually the founder of Root Catalyst. And that's actually before then, there was another group. What's the name again?
Urban Creators.
Urban Creators, right. So, and he's very outstanding in what he did. So if Alex, you could just do like maybe a minute of what you do and then actually share with us your tipping point and what happened.
Sure. So my name is Alex. I grew up in New York City, and the work that I do now and have been on this path for the last 15 or so years is as much personal as it is communal. I work with schools and neighborhoods in the city that I live in to reclaim empty space and create gardens. And for me, that work has had many different iterations in terms of how it felt tethered to my purpose or my sense of purpose. When I was 15, I was in high school, I had a very powerful and transformative experience where I was on a trip to New Orleans, another city in the US, soon after Hurricane Katrina had devastated the city. And the narrative that I had heard over and over was that this natural disaster is what devastated the city. And when I went there and heard stories from people who had survived the storm and were rebuilding, it felt like a veil was lifted up from my perception of not only the situation in New Orleans, but of the world, when I realized that while the hurricane itself was a natural disaster, the disproportionate effect that that storm had on poor people and people of color was very unnatural. The result of whose homes were devastated and who had the least resources to come back was absolutely correlated to race and to class. And that those issues stemmed back decades, hundreds of years into the design of cities, into the forming of our country, into the colonization of the land that we now call the United States. And the that experience really jolted me and helped me see that there is an inseparable connection between our natural environment and the socio-cultural conditions that we create and we live in. And that sent me down a path of being like a really like angsty, angry social justice organizer, and organized a lot of protests and youth organizing. And it took years and years and years until I realized this, but you know, there's not enough time to tell all the stories, but in time I realized that in a lot of ways the most radical thing that an individual can do or a community can do is grow your own food and sustain yourself. And after years of my energy as an activist being channeled into trying to dismantle the systems that oppress us, my body started to change, my perception and values started to shift towards if the idea that if we can sustain ourselves as individuals and cultivate our healthy bodies and cultivate healthy communities, then we actually liberate ourselves from those systems. And those systems are just as dependent on us as consumers who buy their products, as participants in those systems. If we become independent from them, those systems start to fall apart. And those are not things that are gonna happen in my lifetime, but I see myself, every time I plant one seed in a community garden, feels like a small step in the direction of building interdependence on a relational level with the people who I live near, with people of different generations in the communities that I'm a part of, and ultimately with the earth. The Dean mentioned earlier that change comes from a series of many, many small ripples coming together to create a wave. And I think that that is very true of social movements, and I think that that's true in our bodies. That's how we transform. So that was a tipping point, but the truth is that in my life, I've had so many small, incremental moments that maybe I didn't even recognize in the moment was profound, but continued to have nudged my course a little this way or shifted my journey a little bit this way. And those have all been, you know, if there's a common thread between those experiences, that they're relational and they impacted something within me. We all met on these like crazy journeys that I still don't even understand. And, you know, up until I was a part of this Interdimensions of Climate Change series, my relationship to farming and urban agriculture, I didn't see it as a spiritual practice. And I still currently don't have a specific spiritual practice or religious practice to this day, but coming into contact and in building relationships with like people who've become lifelong friends who have so many different kinds of relationships to their land, to their culture, to their work, to their bodies, to their experience, has slowly, relationship by relationship, experience by experience, shifted the way that I understand myself in relation to the land that I come from and that my ancestors come from. And so it's slow, it's gradual. Like sometimes there are these like hugely profound moments that just like change everything. But, you know, I think just as importantly are those smaller gradual shifts that come along the way. And so now as a gardener, I am trying really hard to tap into a deeper, more spiritual connection to the work of farming, because all of our ancestors at some point were farmers. Every single person from every single culture on this planet, maybe are one generation removed, maybe 10 generations removed, but all of our people, everyone who's here, came from people who came from land and lived in deep harmony with that land. And as a person who grew up in New York City, I didn't have that. I'm so far removed, I have no idea how far back the land stewards of my family go. I don't know. And I'm beginning to see the work that I do as starting to create a new, you asked about legacy, create the beginning of a new trajectory. I hope my kids have a much deeper relationship with land than I'll ever be capable of because of the world that I came from. And hopefully their children can have an even deeper one, generation by generation. So I don't know that that really answers the like tipping point question, but I think there's value in recognizing that sometimes there are those moments that shift your whole perspective, and when we're lucky enough to have those moments, harness them and reflect on them. But at the same time, I wouldn't want us to overlook the small gems along the way that tend to come from just experiences with the earth or experiences with other people and sharing and exchanging wisdom.
Thank you very much, Alex. So we move to our next panelist, Reem. Reem is from Bahrain, and she is a Wonder Woman in many, many ways. Pioneer in a lot of things in Bahrain, and she goes through a lot of challenges. So yes, her resume would look glorious, and people will think she's an amazing woman, but as I was very fortunate to be friends with her, and she shared with me, actually it's a lot of fear too in the process of what she's doing. So, so Reem, if you could share with everyone, actually, you know, just either it's tipping points or little tipping points like what Alex is talking about. How did you take, you know, your passion for the ocean? You know, she's like the first woman, okay, working in the field of ocean studies in Bahrain. And she also helped bring this environmental studies to the universities in Bahrain because they didn't have that. So it's a lot of first pioneering stuff, a lot of challenges. So please share with us, like when you're doing this work, how that went from work into it's part of who you are.
Thank you, Chang Ji. First, thank you so much for having us here. It's been amazing. It's my first time on this side of the world, so it's a very big learning experience, and it's been amazing, so thank you for having us. My name is Reem, and actually Reem in Arabic means the Arabian gazelle. Don't know if you know what a gazelle is, but it's Bambi, if you've ever watched the movie Bambi. So it's a little antelope that lives in the desert, but our Reem lives in the desert. And it's a small deer that lives in the desert, and it can survive with almost no water. It eats plants which contain water, and that's how it's resilient. It's small. It doesn't grow big at all. So if you see it, you wouldn't even think it's an adult. So my parents, when they gave me my name, they hoped that I would grow up to be a resilient being in the world and be able to like adapt to the change of what the world is going through. If you don't know where Bahrain is in the Arabian Gulf. It is the third smallest country in Asia. Okay, so it's a very, very small country, and we've been through many different colonies. We have a history of, actually, I don't know if you've heard of Gilgamesh, but he came to Bahrain to look for the seed of immortality, because he believed that the seed of immortality is around our island. And we are 33 islands, and we are the only country in the world that bans the sale of cultured pearls because we have a lot of natural pearls, okay? And I don't know if you know how natural pearls are made. People think it's a sand that goes in and creates a pearl, and that's not true. A pearl is actually a tumor. It's an infection. And you know, it enters the body of an oyster and it irritates the oyster. So what the oyster does is through the mother of pearl that's inside, it starts layering. So it secretes the mother of pearl, which we call the nacre, and it layers and it layers and it layers. And then the aim is to spit it out in the ocean. So actually, if you look at the sediment or the sand, you can find natural pearls. But look at the craziness, right? So nature is wonder. So most of our economy in the past, before the discovery of oil, completely relied on the pearling trade. And actually, Cartier came to Bahrain because of that very good quality of pearls. And actually, the pearl of the Queen of England has some of the Bahraini pearls on it, and some of the best. So that's why we were called the Pearl of the Gulf. So as I grew up like most Bahraini children around the shores. There was no such thing as kindergartens, you know. Whoever's outside will take care of you, right? So we just run around, you just do your thing. And I remember I used to love being on the beach after school, and then when my parents would finish work, they would come pick me up, me and my siblings. And I remember I used to watch the boats, and one day I told my father, I said, Baba, why are there no women on the boats? And he said, well, it's just not what we do. But that doesn't mean that you cannot be on that boat. And I said, well, when I grow up, I want to be a woman on that boat. And he said, okay, but what do you want to do? Be a fisherman? You know, and I was like, not really. I want to go see what lives in there. And that, I think, was the beginning of that relationship or thought of wanting to dive deeper into the unknown. So I don't have a lot of time, but there are 3 tipping points that I want to touch upon. So the first tipping point in my life was actually when we had the Arab Spring. Maybe you heard about it, right? And it also happened in Bahrain. I had just finished university. I was filled with energy, and we heard that the climate change UNFCCC COP is coming to Qatar, which is right next to where our island is. And they were looking for young people to be able to talk about climate change. And they could find no young people from our region, because everybody wanted to get in the finance and banking sector. So someone said, I think there's a crazy lady who is doing something there, because on my first day of work, I went to England, I did my degree in marine biology, I came home. And then I went to work. And the first day at work, obviously they were all men, they were like, where is your father? Does he know you're here? And I said, excuse me, sir, on your first day at work, did you ask you, where is your father? Does he know he's here? You know? And then people were like, what is this crazy lady doing? So everybody was talking about me in Bahrain and the neighboring places where people would travel to. And I was so frustrated. And there was a bit of clash, which is natural. And the first thing my father said to me, he said, you're uncomfortable. Do you think they're not uncomfortable with you? So I had to think about it. I'm going with anger. So of course they're going to come back with anger. So I had to regulate myself. So I went and I said, hello, uncle, how are you? And it changed the entire conversation, because suddenly he saw me as his daughter, not as someone who's coming to invade their space. And if anything, it changed our working relationship. So that was one of the beginning moments. The second beginning moment that also took me on the upper side was that when we went to this climate change COP, I was like, we need more young people. I'm going to travel to Egypt. And Egypt was crazy during the Arab Spring. And people were, shouting for their human rights. Why are you here? Climate change. What? The army is coming. Climate change. What? People were like, yeah, you're crazy. Why are you here? And then I managed to find people, with the help of an NGO called IndiAct, who was trying to bring us together as young Arab youth to go to the climate COP. What did we do? Typical activists. We show up at the UN conference wearing black t-shirts saying, Arabs, it's time to lead. We are more than oil. The first thing our governments did was keep them out, And the second thing is the UN told us, you better behave yourself because we're going to clip your badge and you're going to be deported. So I had 150 angry young new people coming after the Arab Spring to control. And then I was like, how are you going to control that, right? And then that's also when I learned that the only way we can control our emotions is to have conversations and dialogue. So I took off my black t-shirt and I actually put a white t-shirt on. And then I sent a very polite email to the head of Arab states and I said, can we please have a meeting? We would love to get to know you. Not to talk about the COP, but to get to know you. It changed the entire situation. As the years went by, I was getting frustrated with people because I felt like I had to manage my emotions and people's emotions. And I just need one more minute because I'm very conscious of time. And I decided I need to go away and be by myself for a little bit. So I decided to do my PhD. Crazy. Why would you do a PhD? And everyone who's done a PhD or is thinking about a PhD, it's a difficult journey, of research. You're by yourself a lot. I love my PhD. Please do a PhD if you'd like to do a PhD. I had a great time. I loved my research topic, and it was on coral reefs. I had to spend over 100 hours underwater diving, observing fish. I don't speak fish language. They don't speak human language. I had to look at reefs and study reefs. They were telling me their stories. I didn't understand. I was like, budon, 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 budon. Shema? Budon. That was me underwater, literally, the entire time. But watching these fish, and I was looking at different qualities of reefs, and the fish, and same species, by the way, the fish that lived in very good quality reef were so cute. They were happy to see me there. They were happy to share their food with all the other fish on the reef. The fish that were in the low quality reef were very angry fish. The fish is this small, a butterfly fish, and they'd come to you and they're like, zzz, zzz. I was like, yeah, that's a very angry fish. You know, they didn't want to share, and it just showed you how different species around the world, when you lower their quality of life, it's natural for them to be aggressive. So how do we respond to that? And that's when I started to look at spiritual ecology. And what does spiritual ecology means, which takes us into our inner dimensions. And the reef is built on layers and layers of old coral, exactly like how our societies are built on what our ancestors. And the last tipping point is what brings me here today, is after I spent this time and I thought, how do I share this knowledge but create opportunities for others that are like me in my country to build for a future where we talk about climate change and do something about it, but in a bit of more harmony with no anger, given our situation. A few months ago, I was sitting in June, we got funders to study dugongs, and I was being told, how's the research going? And we had the missile coming through from Iran to Qatar, and we were told to go to shelters. And I'm like, the research is going fine. I'm not fine, okay? But it will be fine, you know? But then when you start thinking, how do I respond to this? It's when the world starts talking back and making things possible. So what I want to really close with is that in the end of the day, when I created Nuwat, which is the organization I work for now, which means the heart of living, the heart of all living cells, it's the nucleus, right? So we have to be that nucleus whereby we work on our things in the inside. Like, yes, we will be angry. I might look okay right now, but I could also be a dragon when I'm really angry, you know? But how do we work from the inside? That will show up on the outside. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As usual, love you. Okay, so the next person here is Daniel, and he's from the Dominican Republic. And I think if you've seen from the flyer, he's consultant to UNESCO and also to the Dominican Republic government. But I don't want to draw on that experience, Daniel. I want to draw from something that is very unique in you, is if you could share with, you know, the audience maybe a few tipping points or maybe one major tipping point with, you know, the lessons that you learned from the whales.
Thank you. I'm Daniel, and I want to share, I have many tipping points in my life. Two of them almost coincided at the same time. They were very different and somehow connected. I used to be, for my country, a climate change negotiator. That's a long story how I ended up doing that. I didn't even work for the government, but I ended up representing my government in different COPs of climate change. And I was tasked to negotiate on the Paris Agreement. So I was a negotiator on the climate agreement, which sounds very fancy. At that point, I thought I'd rather be on a war, like real, than be here. It's so stressful and complicated and frustrating. And I remember being in the middle of the negotiations, feeling like all the negative emotions all together that you can feel, from angriness and frustration, having to convince people of things that I thought that you needed to convince. Like, my task was to make sure that education was part of the agreement. Would you think there will be any country against that? I had like 50 countries against that. And I was like, I cannot believe it. And some countries that were developing countries. And so that's how complicated the whole process was. And in that moment of observing such a cold system, so detached, we were discussing like the future of the earth. And there I was observing dynamics of people coming as far away emotionally from that. It felt like a financial conversation, like talking about numbers. And we ended up, in the end, how that was resolved, humanity. I ended up offering and sitting down with coffee, beer, and water and juices with people. I mean, the way was becoming human again, talking to the humans, not the countries, and making people like, we are beyond our country. So when I was speaking to the humans, it was the only moment, the only way we actually ended up, and education was the first topic that was agreed on the Paris Agreement. Every topic was blocked until education. We were the first one that say, we are all in agreement. And I believe it was because we became human. And then, very shortly after, I came back home, and with my wife, we went to see whales. My country, the Dominican Republic, is the country that receives most of the northern hemisphere humpback whales. Has anyone here observed a dolphin or a whale close by? Have anyone had that experience? I can make a long story. My story was that moment of watching a whale close by was incredibly powerful, and at the same time was depressing because of the human experience that happened around. I had drunk people in the boat, loud music. It was terrible, but at the same time, the whales seemed to be aware of what was happening. And they started jumping very high, higher than normal. And people that were very irrespectful in that boat suddenly become silent. And I felt something changed on them, and I felt I want to help other people go to that transformation. And I became slowly aware that part of our problem with climate change, and pretty much any other problem that we have with nature, is because we have forgotten that we are nature, and we are part of nature, not above. We are part of the system. As the professor showed on his presentation of the eco and ego, we are part of the circle. And I started, and to this day, to provide experiences for people to go and connect with the whales in a respectful way, facilitating the experience to become aware that there are other sentient beings that we share the planet, and that we humans must learn to be humble, and we can learn so much from other species. I know, and I've been reading that in Taiwan you can actually see a lot of dolphins in certain parts. I will invite you not to go to have an entertainment, but to go with the awareness that you can connect with a species that may be even more intelligent than us. Just open the possibility. I'm not saying they are, but just go with, could I learn something from this species? Could this species teach me something that could help my humanity expand? And not to compare if it's more intelligent or not, but can I expand my consciousness by engaging awareness with other species? So that's something that I feel you have the treasure here in Taiwan that other countries doesn't have, to have that experience. And I feel that if we go and have those connections, some inner changes for the better and allow us to make a better change outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing that. It's a magical experience to connect with such majestic creatures, and it really generates a lot of like a deep respect when we think that we control, but we don't. In no way we are in control. We're not masters. Now we turn to Greg. Greg is, well, our panelist is actually Rumpai, which is his significant other, or he says his better half. But unfortunately, though, his poor little girl caught a cold, and this is her first cold. She never had a cold before. So Rumpai is taking care of her right now, and Gregory is going to represent Rumpai and also Pun, right? But Gregory, Gregory is actually from the U.S., but he is also, he married to Rumpai, and then, you know, he's now identified yourself as from Thailand. An American in Thailand, right? Okay, so now Gregory, if you could share though, how did you, like, you know, this is moving from the U.S. now. The U.S. is market economy, you know, it's all about consumerism and stuff. That's a huge transition now moving into Pun, which is a beautiful village that I think some of you have went. But introduce a little bit about Pun and also your transformation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think coming from the land currently referred to as the United States of America, it is kind of the crux of amnesia and forgetfulness. This kind of American dream, this ideal, this modernity epidemic that's now globalized, trying to pursue this, like, you know, elite relationship with something that's beyond nature, is very strong there. But then I fell into traveling, actually incidentally because of a relationship with Buddhism, another story for another time. But it brought me to Tibet and other regions of Asia, where I came into contact with different indigenous peoples, and got exposed to a land-based lifestyle, and ultimately seed saving, which Pun, where I live, is a seed saving center. The big kind of aha moment was, at the time I was a bit of an academic. Now I'm kind of a recovering academic. And you know, with all due respect for academia. But the thing is, like our professor was sharing, is I started to realize, like, intellectually studying all of these things, it's like, what's it gonna do if it's not embodied, which is what I believe you were sharing. And when I was with these so-called developing, you know, people, they seemed to be the most intelligent people I'd ever met. As long as they had a sharp knife, they could get anything they needed, especially the nomadic peoples. They could, you know, if they needed food, they knew every single plant around them, or they knew how to get an animal, and they would do it in a sacred way. So there was this spiritual component. All of these things I did not have in America growing up. It was heady. The relationship with the land, the relationship with the intergenerational spiritual component had been severed, you know. And so that was kind of the aha moment, which came through the door of grief, really. You know, and coming from America, very few of us actually know where we're from. There's no deep relationship with ancestry, which I think is quite strong in Taiwan and elsewhere in Asia. You know where you come from. You know your ancestry. You know your land. There's a deep myriad of relations. You're inside of a mythology. You're inside of a story. You're a part of something bigger than you. Didn't have that in America. There was just this politically kind of manipulative narrative that I thought was true. And then it got severed because of travel, and then, like Daniel was saying, real face-to-face, you know, storytelling. And so as I came out of academia, which I still admire and am a part of, but more from a base of story. And so what Panya is, what my wife was working on, is basically an unschool, a place of remembering, where we attempt to bring people together to remember, to come together again with that which modernity has severed us from. And so I write a lot now, and I want to offer you 2 words, because I think so much, like it's coming from an English language, so there's a lot to unpack linguistically. The English language refers to everything in the sentient world as it. But it's alive. Everything is alive, and I never, didn't come into contact with that till coming to Asia and coming to other languages where, it's not it, it's she. It's us, it's we, in relationship with very different situation. And so 2 words that I like to use now is when I'm writing, I try to find these lost, these endangered words, right? Like I'm a seed saver, but also we're savers of wisdom, because in this time we're losing a lot of wisdom. A lot of memories are being severed. You can find the riddles in the words. So I give you these 2 words. One, chiraith. Now this comes from my ancestry, which I trace back to Wales. It's a Welsh word that means a longing for a home that you cannot return to because it's not there. And so this is where a big element of the modern world, the grief, and you have to maturely recognize the situation we're in. The homes that we long for are gone. We have to recognize this, and we have to grow maturely through that situation. As a seed saver, there's a statistic that's hard to accept. 98% of the seed diversity on the planet has gone extinct in the last 40 years because of industrial life. We have to come to terms with that. That's in the biological world and in the spiritual world and in the cultural world. So this was a big aha for me. How do I find home when I come from a place of people who ran away from a place that they don't know? There's no memory of where they came from. And then the other word is solastalgia, which is similar, same, but different. And it's the grief of what's happening to the natural world. You're longing. You're like, maybe your grandparents experienced this more than you. And talk to your grandparents. Ask them, where was that forest you went to when you were a kid? Tell me about it, because I don't get to experience it. And so a lot of the aha tipping points for me came through grief, which again, the modern world tells us grief is a terrible thing, avoid it. I would encourage you not to. Look right into it and explore the texture of like feeling into the longing for what your ancestral memory knows we should still have and can be again. So that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Greg. Profound, very succinct. So now we move on to Shephali. Now Shephali is from US, little Spitfire, right? Yes, we have our women here are really like Spitfires, and very passionate about what she's doing. She is working with indigenous people, indigenous tribes, and also food sustainability, or I don't know, you don't like the word sustainability, so what do you call it? Adaptability.
Yes. Hello?
Okay.
Sorry, Chang Ji. Did you finish?
No, that's it.
How much time do I have?
You have
Like
5
2 minutes.
If you could finish in 2 minutes, that'd be
that-
amazing.
that's
But no,
impossible.
it's okay. Do we have a little bit more time, Professor? Yes, there you go. You got more time.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Shephali. Chang Ji was really very generous. It's difficult to say what I do because I've had countless roles in this work. And there's a reason for it. But I can start with saying that from the outside, it looks like I co-steward with people, with plants, with animals, with all the living beings in a space, a place where we can engage practically with figuring out how to sustain ourselves in the world, no matter what that world is designed to look like. And also have a place where we can continue to learn how to do that and pass that along to other people through education. And then also have a space where we can actually dream and talk about the things that we're not allowed to talk about and actually create the futures that we can't even imagine right now. And so that's what it looks like on the outside. But what is actually happening, the crux of my work, is about multi-species collaboration. And that, like, what is that? I didn't know when I started out. Also complex stories, but what brought me into this work at the heart of it was I also grew up in New York City, like Alex, a very urban environment. I'm a child of immigrants, and I grew up in a very, very difficult, very challenging household, like a lot of suffering. And so since I was very young, my core question was like, is it possible for me to grow myself into something that transcends the conditions that I am around? Can I be something that aligns more to my value? And I didn't know what the answer was, but at some point, I realized that where I could find that out is in nature. So I was like, I have to connect to nature. And I didn't engage in any formal study, I just went out there. And so the tipping points are many. The tipping point is happening to me right now. And it's very, very unglamorous compared to these amazing people. It involved many, many teachers, and we don't have enough time to ever talk about any of them because there's endless teachers in my journey. But one of my primary teachers that keep coming back to me is the forest. And so early on, when I started this work, I knew nothing. And so all I did was show up. And a lot of my work was on the ground. And so I would always be in a position on my knees, very close to the earth. And I did that day after day after day. And just being in that position, just putting myself there and showing up every day, it closed that distance that Daniel was talking about, that distance between things, between me, what was happening around me. And I started, without even realizing, forming intimacy, and without even realizing, engaging in humility. And that, I think, was the first gateway, because of my ability to understand that I know nothing, that I'm around very sophisticated, very elegant operations around me, and to be open to what was happening around me. I was learning through the land while just being there. And I realized that the questions that I came in with, which is, how can I change myself and transcend the conditions that I'm around? And what does it mean? What is my role as a human being? Were not the correct questions. The right questions that were emerging was, one, I'm here to connect with nature, but I don't have to connect with nature. I am nature. And at a fundamentally scientific level in my body, we are holobionts. We have less than 50% of our cells are actually human being cells. The rest of us are made up of all kinds of species, like we are an ecology unto ourselves. So I'm a living ecology inside this ecological system. The other thing that wasn't a question that I was actually engaging with is not that, what is my role as a human being? Every being in the forest already has a role. So I do too as a human being. The question is, how does one become a human being in this world? What am I supposed to do? How do I live with all these other beings? And the forest taught me that, because when you look at what's happening, there are separate elements, but none of them are functioning separately. Like a tree itself, it lives in multiple worlds at the same time. Its roots are in the ground, it's up in the sky, it's talking to fungi, every other living being around it, it's providing shelter to the earth. And so it was teaching me about how to actually allow myself to be open enough to hear those lessons, to continue to be with these beings, to show up every day, and to be brave enough, just like the trees are, where they're allowing all of the experiences of the animals and the beings to come into them. How can I be brave enough to allow this work to flow through me, and then be even more generous in my courage and allow it to actually transform me like an ecological system? A forest, all of the beings in the forest, because they're in conversation with each other, they are in constant adaptation to what is happening to them around. And if they allow it to change their genetic structure, their role and what is happening to them. And that's what we call ecological succession. And so my primary work right now is to be open to thinking about what that means as a complex adaptive system as human beings. How can I continue to allow the work and allow other people, other cultures to continue to inform me about the complex adaptive system that is our cosmos. Like no one person, no one culture can know enough to really understand the nature of life. We need all of our eyes, all of our traditions, all of our stories to be able to add that puzzle piece into a larger understanding of what life is. And at the end of the day, understanding what life is the key to understanding what the nature, the multifaceted nature of climate issues are and what solutions there are. And so we could keep going, but as a takeaway, I encourage you to, as you go through your work, it's more of a blessing. Like, I hope that whatever you do, you have the space and the courage to let it flow through you like that and let it transform you so that you can continue to engage in it in like increasingly relevant, increasingly wondrous ways. And there's so many, but anyway, I think as a whole, we live in a society, much like Greg was saying, that are conditioning us into different ways. And so anytime that you hear there's only one solution, only one person can do this, there's only one, result that will come out of this, that is probably and definitely not the truth. Not probably, I would just say it is definitely not the truth. What we need is everyone. What we need is all the solutions, and what we need is all the perspectives. And I think it's important to keep that as your anchor point as you listen to what's being told to you and you think about how you want to be a human being in all this and what you want to do as your place in creating a future that we can't even imagine.
Thank you, Shephali. Extremely articulate about all these very complex systems. And now we move on to Guo Chan. Of course, as a monastic though, I would like for you to share with everyone, she's actually a very good, very almost quite complete zero waste practitioner. And she has been practicing that for, now, close to 5 years? Yeah, so could you share with us while you're practicing this though, how it actually transformed you?
Okay, I was inspired by Jessica Chang Ji. How many of you know about her? She is local young people, and she is both a doctor in Chinese medicine and also Western doctor, right? And so I know her, and then I start to think about what kind of things that I can take in control. Because zero waste, what does zero waste do is to generate and less trash, which means to minimize the trash that I generate every single day or every moment. So I thought about, I said, okay, because Jessica, she collect her trash, because in this way, we can visibly see what trash that we generated. And then we can measure our impact to this planet. I think this is a very fun way and simple way. So I found a jar, recyclable. So I start to put in, this is how long of the trash that I generated in this bottle. Guess. 2 days? Or 2 days? How long of the can is is accumulated within 1 year? Right. So because of course I'm lucky, I live in a community, so everything is communal. I should have a little share, right? And put inside. But I don't use a single product or food or anything in single packaging, because I would have to put inside this bin. This bin is too small. So I try to minimize. So through the journey, actually I found out zero waste is to minimize the waste outside, which is to our environment. But did I also do the zero waste within, with my mind? So it's very interesting because at first, you will just jump into the solution, right, to act. So can I do that? But sometimes I feel like, how about I have the hatred, I have angry. Those are also trash. That is invisible. And that actually is the driving force of this person. So, something like this. So, for instance, I do not use tissue paper. People are like, what? How do you clean your butt? Yes, I have little angel. I have a little, I kind of create something new, I can clean out myself. Because I think this is something that I can take in control. I don't use it, but I still have to keep myself clean, as a community members, and also to show people that's an alternative way of doing, things. So, and as I was doing this, and I become more aware of what it does if I use this material, and what the material, where the material comes from, and how it does when I trash it, So everything kind of slowly connecting, the dot, this dot and that dot all connect together like a web of life. So it makes me to understand everything is not object. They are alive. They are also living beings in this earth. So it's kind of part of my body, right? So I think I'm perfect. Well, at the beginning, I say, you shouldn't eat this one. That's single packaging. You're creating trash. I do talk to people like that, and people was like scared away. When they see me, they all run away. No one want to talk to me. Then I realize, okay, this is not the right way of doing things. If I want to invite more people to take on this practice, so I start to change myself first. Kind of really care about people and talk to them and do not judge them, label them, So slowly they try to understand why I want to do it this way. So gradually, this is one of the ways that is kind of transformation. The other thing is, I think the one of the incidents that I discovered, I also make the same mistakes that I feel you shouldn't do. Because I often see others are doing that, but I didn't know, sometimes I did that too. I was like, wow. So by doing this zero waste practice, makes me become more aware of my thoughts, my speech, and my action. Yeah. So now I feel like this single day, that if I can be aware of what I'm doing, and I'm doing my part, and I'm part of the nature, I'm part of the community. If I can invite more people to do the same thing, but differently, you can do, if you can do, start from one steps. Collectively, we all can be better, right? It doesn't have to be collecting your trash. You can do other way. Yeah, there are so many. Did I answer your question?
I'm not a professor. I'm not grading you. You're just sharing with people. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for everyone for sharing your various tipping points. But one of the common thread that is threading through all of these is just one word: caring. You need to care. Science is not just science. If you care, science is different. Science is nature manifesting through your language, right? So it's the heart. I like to remind everyone, we're talking about, also I like what Gregory was talking about, is remembering, humility, so that you could learn from everyone. So creating this trusting relationship, not just with humans, but also with living things, with all the planets here. You're weaving all this tapestry, and we say humanizing, right? But it's also weaving all of this thing together to call earthling. It's not humaning, it's earthling, right? Which includes all life on this planet. So I'd say, from what I think you heard from all these panelists, they went from headspace where, this is just knowledge, right? And the way they do it is, I'm just outcome driven, into into something that it comes from caring. When you care, the humility comes up, and from your heart, or I would say from your headspace, the solutions are very finite because it's very fixed. But if you can also include the caring, the heart, that's what creates earthlings. The possibilities are actually infinite. That's where you draw your strength from. It's not only just talking about it, it's not only just knowledge, but you have to include the heart. Then that weaves the tapestry of life on this planet, this beautiful blue planet together. Thank you very much. Thank you, AlMealla.